I just wanted to make a quick video on Sudan because I've been seeing some stuff and I think it'd be a little bit weird for me to not say something given that I'm Sudanese. I was born in Sudan, for those who don't know. Yes, I get accused of being Ethiopian a lot of the time. I'm not Ethiopian, Sudanese. And when I was very young, I left Sudan when I was less than a year old. So I spent the first 8 years of my life, with the exception of one school year in Saudi Arabia. And that one school year I did spend in Sudan, and that was first grade. I feel like there are a lot of misunderstandings when it comes to the conflict in Sudan. People have all sorts of ideas about what's going on, and some of them are true. Some of them are just not the whole truth, I would say, if they are true. And what I often hear, it's just a lot more complicated as, these conflicts often are. For instance, I will hear people who seem to think that what's happening is persecution of Christians. And that's not untrue, but it's a very tiny part of the truth. Or I would hear that, oh, it's Arabs killing blacks. Not really untrue, but not completely true either. And so I just wanted to try to shed some light on what's happening and give sort of my take and thoughts on it. So the country is essentially being torn apart by two military forces. So you have the Sudanese armed forces and then you have the rapid support forces. I'm not going to go into their histories or how they were formed. You can look into that if you'd like. But currently it seems that the rapid support forces are sort of taking over parts of Western Sudan, where Darfur, for instance, is. And they are killing people seemingly indiscriminately. I mean, it's really hard to know truly what's happening on the ground. But from the footage that I've seen on social media, it seems pretty bad. I don't know how indiscriminate it is, but I also want to say that most of the people in Sudan today are actually Muslim, not Christian. So the vast majority of people being killed are Muslims themselves, which is what really makes this thing really complicated. I think if you are a religious minority or minority in any sense, you're almost certainly more likely to be targeted, but it also seems that you're likely to be targeted even if you're Muslim. So I unfortunately do have family members who are there when the war started, and a lot of them have left the country, but some of them remain, and I know some who have died, unfortunately. And so seeing footage of not just the brutality, but even just the destruction that befell the country, it's absolutely devastating. I visited Sudan 15 years ago, and there are some places that I remember walking through that are completely destroyed now. I saw some really harrowing footage of young kids pleading with their captors to not kill them. Very devastating. And footage from Google Maps or Google Earth where you actually see bloodstains in the ground from satellite images. And supposedly that's never happened before. I mean, I don't know how true that claim is, but it doesn't really matter because seeing it was very, very sad. And I know that the UAE is allegedly supporting the rapid support forces, and a lot of people are blaming them for arming them, equipping them with the things that they need to carry out this destruction. I also know that the Sudanese armed forces, the opposing military group, is also not innocent, and they've also carried out atrocities. I've seen people sometimes blame these outside forces, which perhaps they are to blame, but also I'm really conflicted about this because these are my people and I care about them. But I'm conflicted because they're still killing their own people, people who look like them, people who believe in what they believe. But yes, they're especially going to kill those who don't look like them, which is so, so devastating. In Sudan, there are Sudanese Muslims who think of themselves as Arab, partly because they speak the Arabic language and also partly because they believe themselves to be descendants of Arabs. And yeah, there are differences, like phenotypically, sometimes between them and non Arab Sudanese. And it's not necessarily just like the color of your skin, because you can have, dark Arab Sudanese. This supremacy that exists across the board, it seems like, in Muslim majority environments where people want to be Arab and think that it gives them some advantage and that they are better in some way. And that comes, unfortunately, from the Muslim sources themselves, which seem to promote this idea of Arab supremacy. I mean, it's Even just in the fact that the Quran has to be read in Arabic. You have to speak to God in Arabic in your prayers, which is insane. Doesn't make any sense. God should be able to understand any language that you speak. And there's a ton of racism, unfortunately, in Sudan, even though the ones who are carrying out the killing and also being killed are primarily Sudanese Arabs who look like me essentially, who are still black, but they view Sudanese non-Arabs, even if they're also fellow Muslims, as beneath them. So I have a personal story just to give you an idea of what the mentality is like there. I grew up partly in Saudi Arabia, and having grown up there, I experienced racism at the hands of the Saudi Arabian because to them, I was beneath them. So they treated me as less than human, honestly. And, they call black people abid, which means slaves. And then I remember when I visited Sudan, I was speaking to a cousin of mine, and he travels to the UAE with his dad, and he noticed that the Emiratis would treat him as less than Arab because they didn't view him as full Arab as they are, which he was very offended by. And he said to me, "Can you believe that this is how they view us? They don't view us as Arab like they are." Of course, I had already known this because I had grown up in Saudi Arabia, whereas he hadn't. And so I told him, "Yeah, I'm not surprised at all." And he said, "Yeah, that's so despicable because, we're all Muslims and brothers in faith." And so I said to him, "Well, the funny thing is, I noticed that Sudanese people are doing that to southern Sudanese." Then this is before South Sudan had seceded from Sudan. And he immediately went to defending the discrimination of South Sudanese people. And he said to me, "No, you don't understand. These people are different. They look at you with such contempt." And I said, "Well, could it be that they're mistreated?" And he said, "No, that there's something inherently wrong with them." I was so taken aback by that. And it was so crazy to me that the very thing that he accused others of doing to him unfairly, he turns around and in the same breath does to somebody else and justifies it. So, this is what I mean when I say that this thing is really complicated and complex. And I don't doubt for a single second that the supremacy that exists in the Muslim faith, that's propagated by it, has played a huge role not only in this conflict, but in a lot of other conflicts. Regardless, these are human beings, and irrespective of whether they are Muslim or Christian, I feel for them, and I don't want this to happen to them. But I also feel like part of the solution has to be to fight the ideology that's causing this issue, or that's contributing majorly to this issue. All this to say, it's not as simple as some people are making it out to be. It's not Arabs against blacks. It's blacks who think they're Arab against blacks who don't think they're Arab, or who aren't Arab or don't speak Arabic, if Arab means just speaking Arabic. Everybody in Sudan is black. Literally, it's in the name of the country, Sudan. The Arabic word for black is aswad. So everybody's black, and it's also not as simple as just Christians are being persecuted. In fact, after the secession of South Sudan, most Christians are not even in Sudan anymore. But there are some minorities that still remain, and yes, they are almost certainly guaranteed to be persecuted. But also, Muslims are persecuted. So, yeah, the supremacy is just, yeah. And then also, people criticize other Arab nations or Muslim majority nations for not coming in to rescue Sudan. Valid criticism. Again, you wonder to what extent that's also the racism on their end, that, Sudanese people in their minds are not as worthy of being protected or whatever as, I don't know, Lebanese, Palestinian, whomever. So yeah, it's complicated. And that's all I wanted to say. I don't really have much else to say. I'm trying to make sense of it. I've lost family members and I've shed a lot of tears over this, and I don't know. I hope the killing stops. I pray the war comes to an end. I also pray that the ideology is wiped out. And I will say that oftentimes there is some good that comes out of tragedies. For instance, I know in Iran, they had the revolution, and they had this religious class take over. And you might have thought that it would have resulted in people being more religious. That's been quite the opposite effect. So I wonder and hope that that might even be the case with Sudanese people. And I know that also happened in Syria, where a lot of people left Islam because they just saw the horrific things that the Islamic State was doing in the name of Islam. And they realized that they were completely justified in doing so just based on the Muslim sources themselves. So I hope that my people also wake up. I will keep praying for them and for the nation. And also for my brothers and sisters in Nigeria who are being persecuted. I know the situation there is not the same as it is in Sudan. And there it seems that it is primarily Christians being persecuted by Muslims, and also very, very depressing. Let's keep them all in our prayers.